Hello witches, and welcome back to Activist Witch, where we discuss witchcraft and activism. You can call me Isha, my pronouns are she, they. Today's video is a bit particular, and it's just me talking about my life, really, what I've learned so far, and trauma, abuse, the cycle of abuse, the way that I have my own coping mechanisms, not to say that they are correct, really, but, you know, you get these old, you have to survive. But before we get started, let me remind you that I've opened a Ko-fi. If you like what I do here, you can support me directly there with a recurring donation, a one-off donation, or even get a tarot reading with me, Italian style. The low-income option there starts at £5, and for the foreseeable future, part of my profits from tarot readings go split equally between Coaches to Gaza, who supports Palestinian refugees in Cairo, and the Good Law Project, who's trying to bring trans rights back to the UK, because trans rights are human rights. So if you decide to support me there, thank you so very much.
Feel for us, this man implores, and maybe God will feel for you. More than 50 Palestinians were killed hoping to access aid close to the Zikkim crossing in northern Gaza yesterday. The Israeli army says it fired warning shots at a crowd near aid trucks and is examining the incident.
This is the first important thing, and the only thing that I hope you will listen to if you don't watch the entire video, and it's this. Whenever you see in the media two factions pitted against each other, and you are presented the idea that they are equally valid, always analyze this. What are they asking? So here's how you play the game of spot the fascist, spot the Nazi. You have a faction that says that people shouldn't think or say or behave a certain way. You will find out that those are all things that we do by choice. We can decide to spout hate. We can decide to go and protest in front of hotels that we think host asylum seekers and refugees. We can decide to actively spend money to make the life of trans people unlivable outside in public, like J.K. Rowling. Those are things that we can do or we cannot do, and it's up to our decision. When, on the other hand, you have people that do not want someone to exist, people that don't want immigrants, asylum seekers and refugees to exist in the UK, we have to think of our own, that kind of thing. When you have people that don't want trans people to exist, then there's nothing that the receivers of this hate can do, because the only thing that they can do is stop existing. And therein lies the difference between activists like me, who demand that J.K. Rowling does not spend money and her influence to make the life of trans people worse. People like me who fight for a more decent and dignified ways for asylum seekers to even ask for asylum in the UK, for LGBTQ people to have the same rights as cis and straight people. Those are things that can be changed. J.K. Rowling can stop any day to use her influence to do what she does. And the moment that she stops, so do we. There's nothing else. I don't hate her I don't know her personally, but what she does actively hurts me and hurts people that I love. Whilst on the side of TERFs, their idea is your existence in my head can potentially hurt me. They have decided so. That hasn't happened. Make no mistake, that hasn't happened. They have decided that they are uncomfortable with the idea. But has something happened? No. No more than how it happens with cis people. Again, I've explained before, I think that we don't talk about the violence of cis woman on cis woman, and that is an issue because cis women can very much be abusers, and I survived two of mine, so I know what I'm talking about. But we can't talk about that because women are wonderful, according to patriarchy, because it's the little prize that patriarchy decides to give white feminists, like J.K. Rowling. So therein lies the difference between the fascist and the activist. The fascist wants someone to not exist. The activist just wants your ideas and your actions to change. And therein lies the difference. The moment that you stop being an asshole, we don't care about the rest of your life or what you do. What you want us to stop is to exist. And there's another name for that. That. And something happened today that made me think about the way that I have dealt with traumatic events and the way that my brain has done its best to handle it. And sometimes the wrong choices that I have made when I was younger on how to get back at the world. I don't think that I've ever said it in so many words, but the first 16 years of my life, I had no inkling from the rest of the world in any form, including my parent, that I had any right to be treated with dignity. And the kind of bullying that exists in Italy, I thought that it was peculiar, I thought that it was unique. It's not quite, but it doesn't seem to be as common, at least in the UK, which is why it took me a very long time to speak out against still the injustice of the UK, because overall, compared to Italy, it's the El Dorado for me. When, for 16 years, from birth to 16, the general feeling is people don't like me. People like to make fun of me and like to attack me and deride me. The kind of bullying that we have in Italy, it's very childish. It's not something that you can argue with or against. It's something that you can't reason with. And therein goes the oblivion, because I'm like, I know that this happened many times. I cannot go back in my mind and remember a specific episode. But you know what reminded me of a specific episode, like the most outrageous, like when I was thrown food in the street, or when this classmate of mine in middle school started to dance around me, sounding and looking like a monkey and chanting my surname. So those are particularly egregious, so I guess they stuck with me. But it's not something that I think about often, and if you ask me, I'm a very happy person. And I think that's because my brain is incredibly good once something bad has happened to archive it. So it's not that I black out, but it very rarely comes back to the front of my mind. Something that brought back the kind of abuse that Italy is used to perform is the very first video essay that I made, which is on another channel, but it was literally about the fatphobia and racism in Italy. The two are connected. And it was based on my experience, and my experience made me want to look into the phenomenon and why was it so different from what I experienced in the UK, what culturally is around. And I'm not saying that the UK is not racist or fatphobic. I'm saying that Italy is so much worse, that living in the UK made me realize why is it so much worse in Italy. And fascism has to do with it, and the colonies and the colonial past of Italy that has never been discussed or acknowledged is part of it. But what was most interesting is that when I made that video, for some bizarre reason, it actually reached people in Italy. Not because I promoted it in any way, but it reached Italian people. And I got some comments that reminded me, oh, this is the irrational, clown-like derision that you cannot argue with. And one of those stuck with me because it gave me the same sense of impotence that I had for the first 16 years of my life. And what they said was, oh, now say it without crying. Do I have to explain to you why that's... You can't argue with that. What's there to argue? It's so dehumanizing all at once. It doesn't take into consideration anything that I have said, any of my analysis, any of my sources, any of the information that I've actually put out there. And it just derides me as if I'm not quite human. Nothing that I've said, nothing that I've put there matters. It's just, I don't even have the words for it. And it always made me feel so completely impotent. How do you argue with that? How do you try and sit down with that? How do you try to reason with that? How do you reason your right to exist and the idea that maybe what I say matters as much as what you say and what you think, and maybe we should consider those things not just because we are humans saying things, but then the next step comes in and it's like, well, where are your receipts? And that is why I've been making videos for 15 years. And for a good part of these 15 years, I've talked about factual stuff, where despite my experience in things, I've always felt the very strong need to bring receipts. What I say doesn't matter if I don't have some research that proves what I say makes sense. And that's where it comes from. Like when the attack is on, the idea that I was this funny little creature that people could point and laugh at, but that is objectified because of that, and so you can't talk back. There's nothing you can say, because whoever points and laughs does not consider you on their same level. You're not their equal if they can point and laugh like that. And to be fair with you, and it's not to sound tragic, but I do look back and ask myself a lot of times, it's one of the main discussions with my psychologist, it's looking back, I don't know how I got to 16 years old, feeling every day like that, with no sign whatsoever that things would have changed. I had this absolutely blind belief that things would have changed, and what I would tell myself was just, it's just fine. I just haven't found my people. I will find my people and they will appreciate what I have and do and say. But nothing that had happened in the first 16 years gave me reason to believe that. And you might think that I'm exaggerating. No, this started in kindergarten. Like, I had bullies in kindergarten. It went on in elementary. There wasn't one day that I could get out of the house and not get harassed one time from other children when I was a child. It was the standard. I knew that going out of the house would have happened. That would have happened. And I had made my peace with that. And this is just what it is. And it made me live with a certain kind of resignation for a long time. In Italy, I always felt like, well, I know that my name sounds weird. I know that I look weird. I'm not normal. I didn't quite have the concept of I'm not one of them, because I knew that my name sounded weird, but why am I not like the other children? I genuinely believed that I was white in my innocence. But I knew that, yeah, white, but I'm fat, and my name sounds weird. And I knew that it sounded weird because during middle school, I tried to start to sign the papers where we were doing, tests, and you're supposed to have your full name there, like it's on the registry. And instead of using my surname, I tried to use my mother's surname. Because I knew, to a degree I knew, but I didn't have the concept of race explained to me ever at any point, other than we do charity and we pity kind of the people from North Africa, but that's it. And I knew to a degree that my name made me sound like that, but I couldn't possibly be that. Like, I've always been here. So at 11, I started to try and sign with my mother's Italian surname. I was taken to the headmaster and punished because of that, because I was signing, writing my name in a way that it was illegal. No white teacher in that school stopped a second to ask me or understand why I was even doing that. I was punished for it, and that was it. And I got to 16-year-old. I didn't do bad things to myself, surprisingly. But I look back and I'm like, I don't know how. And then I got to 16, and something happened. And despite the daily disappointment of the world, I meet someone important. The world knows of her existence. The world fights to have her attention. And I'm 16-year-old, and I look like a fucking freak. There's not a way around it. Like, I see my picture then, and I'm just like, something was wrong with me, and nobody thought about doing anything. But I meet this person, and I don't know, and I will never know what she saw. But I tend to say she plucked me from mediocrity, and that's true. There's not a better description of it. She made me feel important. She made me feel chosen. And it was peculiar because it was the first time in my life that I had something that other people wanted, which was like being sort of chosen by this person that so many were looking up to. And I didn't know why. I still don't know why. But that was basically the confirmation of what, for some reason, I've been telling myself up until that point. It's fine that they treat you like that. You just haven't found your people. And she was the first person that told me, oh shit, there's my people. And for some bizarre reason, she is in such a position, I don't know if it's of actual power, but at least of such popularity. And she looks at me, and she has chosen me, and she treats me this way. And she was incredibly gracious to me for a very long time. She gave me an access and a care that I has no understanding. No understanding why. I don't know. I will never know. Because, unfortunately, she passed away before it ever occurred to me to ask her. But that, for the first time in my life, put me in a privileged position, at least within the communities of people that looked up to this person. And at the beginning, I wasn't gracious. And that's where we go in the cycle of abuse. So every single day, there was something to reinforce the traumatic experience of, you're disgusting to people. They would much rather you don't exist. It's clearly, it feels insulting to them that their eyes move and you are between them and whatever they're looking at. I could feel that, like, that was something very, very clear to me. The least I could be seen, the better. But then this happens, and in a way, I am put in a potential position where I am out there, my face is out there. And for the first time, in a positive context. Why? Because this person who's everybody wants the attention of, pay attention to me. And I wasn't gracious about it in the least. I think that because all that I knew and all that I had been shown was the moment that you have something of value, you beat others with it. It's your stick. So when for the first time in 16 years I have something that other people want, I'd like to say that I didn't flaunt it, and I think this is the reason why in time I have learned you are gracious, you do not flaunt it, because I haven't always been like this. I have used that power irresponsibly. I liked the idea that suddenly these people that found me disgusting also had this kind of jealousy towards me because I had something that they wanted that they didn't have. And they were like, how can you, disgusting thing, have something that I want? How can you have something that says you're not the lower creature that you are? I do not recognize you as human, as high as me. And yet, you get something that I want that I don't have. Yeah, I wasn't gracious about that. And I don't go proud of it, but I completely understand why that was my first reaction. Finally, there is one thing, one context in my life where I go and I am king. And I am, for some reason, put on a pedestal. And I had friends, and I had this thing even back then. Like, suddenly I had friends because I was in this position of privilege. And to those that were kind to me, admittedly, I think that I was kind, but it's too easy to be kind to people that are kind to you, hey? So some of them sort of, I took with me with this privilege, the kind of privilege that you can think about for a 16-year-old that is very much into music, and for some reason, the singer that they look up to decides to look back and give them all this access and all this privilege. So with some people, I take them with me. But with the others that also had that, they had that thing. I know from like forums and the stuff that was at the time. Like, we didn't have Reddit, we didn't have Facebook, there were forums and stuff. And you could tell in the way that they were talking about me that the point was like, how can she? She's lower. And I couldn't quite understand lower why, but I knew that I was lower, and I knew that they thought so. But this person at the fulcrum of everything didn't. And for some reason, she saw something in me. It took me time to understand why graciousness was important. And it took me time to understand that when I talk about something, and now I have the ambition of teaching you something, which sounds presumptuous as I say it, I have the ambition of sharing things that I have learned with their sources, so that in case you want to learn more about it, you can. Don't trust me. Go check the sources that I give you, and that's the best that I can do. But it's been a process to get to the person that I am now. And I think getting out of Italy helped, because the dog-eat-dog mentality of Italy, which I spoke about before, I think it's a sociological issue. I think it might come from the fact that, again, we are a very young country that wasn't unified until 160 years ago. So we have this thing about, if you're not of my direct nucleus, of my direct family, you're a potential enemy. You can steal a slice of my pie. Doesn't matter how big the pie is. If you're not with me, you could be stealing it from me. Which is a mentality that is all too easy to sell in Italy, and that's why Italy is still fascist. It's so easy to foment populism there because of this very individualist and protectionist mentality. So when that is what you're used to, what I was used to, that dog-eat-dog mentality made me feel like you can't just defend yourself. Attack is defense. Thank fuck I got out, because I already knew that was so stressful. There was so much energy all the time. And apart from this one context, which was at best a hobby, couldn't be my life. I made it my life, because that's kind of the reason why then I went to study and work in the music industry. But it's even just the fact that I had the privilege to then decide to go study there was a thing. But getting out of it it got easier to try and shift priorities, because not necessarily for good reasons. Like, I think here in the UK specifically, you don't have as much active acts of competition and therefore dehumanization because of classism. And classism is based on social classes that you cannot change. You can make money, but you'll never become aristocracy. It's that kind of thing. So it's sort of something that you can't fight, you can't work for. And so there are other kinds of issues, but I don't think that ever became something socially to fight each other for. And I think the UK made it easier to learn how to be gracious and have this kind of bizarre emotional generosity of, it doesn't matter like whether you're my friend or not, the simple fact that you're talking to me like I'm a human being, it's good enough. Which is very, very low bar, I know. But again, coming from Italy, oh, say it again without crying. Another comment that I got on that video essay on the fatphobia and racism in Italy was someone going, oh, you're just saying this because you like fit guys, they don't like you, and so this is you crying about it. How do you argue with that? Like, I did research for the last 200 years of Italian history. It was like an hour and 20 minutes long video essay. And when somebody says that, you know for a fact that they haven't watched, they haven't cared, and they have already decided, I have to put you in a box where you are not valid because you're not a human being to me. And that's it. Which, by the way, it's one of the steps of the alt-right playbook, dehumanizing your interlocutor so that they are not on your same level. You do not consider them on your same level so that they do not deserve the dignity to be treated as human. Nothing that they say matters if they're not humans. And there you go. So let's say that an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. Not quite something that I cared about when I was 16. I think I managed to get out of it because, whereas in Italy, again, every time that I got out of the door, I knew what would have happened. I knew once at least I would have been harassed. People would be sniggering, looking at me from the other side of the road, and that was the softest one. Or people would have actively done stuff like throwing food at me. I cannot stress this enough. This was a daily occurrence. One of those things on that spectrum from sniggering to active physical harassment, every single time that I got out of the door. Every single one. And you know, you shrug it at such a point because this is normal. And then I moved to the UK. Well, I moved to Ireland, then I moved here, and I'm like, this is not normal. And I think the most problematic thing of all of this is realizing that what changed me and what allowed me to tap into that graciousness, so that when you have something, it's not a stick that you beat others with, it's a loaf of bread that you share in a sort of way. It was just as little as being treated with dignity, being asked things. Oh, what do you think? It's a very simple thing. I would dare say that for most people it's obvious. Like maybe even as a child you were asked that by your parents. I wasn't. I wasn't by anyone. I always have to bring and deliver what was asked of me. Never because something was asked of what I was thinking or what I wanted. And I'm not saying that to justify the fact that at the beginning I was really petty. I was really petty. 16-year-old, sudden power, I was really petty. But when I started to see that there wasn't that prejudice, that's the thing. People looked at me and something was off. They knew something was off. And it doesn't matter how much I smiled, it doesn't matter how much I tried to be servile. How can I be helpful to you? It was at time merely enough not to be actively harassed, but definitely not good enough to be actively invited to places where people would just like to have me around. I never had like a play date with people my age, with children my age. I think I had my first friends in Italy in campus, so I was in university. And even then, choosing to be friends with me was putting oneself in a precarious position. I had a person tell me to my face, I cannot be friends with you. Like, we can go around and do stuff. If I go out with my friends, I'm not going to invite you to come with us for a picnic or whatever, because if I am seen with you, I will get flack for that. I cannot be seen with you because the bullying that they do to you, the fun that they make of you, they would make of me if I share space and time with you, if I'm associated with you. This was a university. We're talking about adult people, technically. But I managed to move away. So what's the deal? What's the issue? Something similar just happened. And it was surprising to me because in my naivete, my brain had established this is not what the UK does. Which is ridiculous, which is absolutely ridiculous. Like, I know exactly the kind of dehumanization that the UK does, that the far right does. If you're a person of color, if you're queer, if you're trans, if you're disabled in any way. But like I have a lot of sympathy for a lot of people, it's hard to understand things and to feel them inside if a practical example does not happen to you. So as a principle, you understand that bullying is wrong and you possibly don't do it to people, but the idea of dehumanization, unless you have the stomach to look closely at what, say, far-right people tell to each other about refugees, about trans people, unless you go and look at that, which for your health I do not advise, I don't think you grasp the level of dehumanization that from the fascists, from the Nazis, goes on about us. We are not humans, we are animals. And when you take those levels of humanization away, it's much easier to euthanize. Because you don't feel like you're doing that to another human being. I've had the misfortune to find out that there have been far-right circles talking about me. And I've had the misfortune to see how they talk to each other about me. And for the first time in a long time, my brain was brought back full throttle to when I was a teenager, when I was a child, and there was no explanation to what was happening to me. But I was pinned down and beaten up when I was like 11 years old by a lot other 11 years old. And there was no explanation other than the fact that they didn't like me. I was brought back to being 3 years old and in kindergarten, and if the girl that sort of had this circle of kids around her, and she was the queen bee of it, if she were to find out that my dirty, dirty hands were on her favorite book, which had a fairy on top of it, she would have all the kids that were in her circle to come and pull my hair and pull my arms until they managed to take this book from my hands, because I was dirty in it. If I was just having this book in my hands, the pretty fairy on the cover would have been dirtied if I had it in my hands. I am questioning if it's worth, or if it should be thought about, that, you know, the most dangerous thing that I've seen so far is the way that they talk to each other, because it doesn't get to us, and we don't get how dehumanizing it is. But if you keep talk of something, at something, that you do not recognize as being part of the same group that you are, in the sense of human being, like that's the group of human being, human race, then the kind of actions that you will take against people will be animalistic, because you consider the people at the receiving end not people but animals. And that brings me back to the beginning of this treating people like animals. We need to look very closely and do the Nazi test. I think, for what I've seen, for the way that I've seen them treat me and others, and the way they talk about human beings as chattel, as something that needs to be subject to eugenics. I've seen people criticize the fact that people in Gaza are still having children. You cannot be human and say that to another human being. But you don't feel that kind of remorse when you think about neutering or spaying a pet, an animal. So pay attention to these things. When the question is existence, not the choice of politics, not the choice of action, but existence. That tells you everything you need to know about whoever you're talking to. And it doesn't matter how reasonable. I don't think they are reasonable at all. But I understand the language that they use. And unfortunately, gaslighting is one of my triggers. Like when you tell me to my face something that is verifiably wrong, I have the instinct of bringing you all the list of sources that prove you wrong. And I always forget, Nazi don't do that, don't care for facts and resources, but they like that you provide it to them because they made you waste time. They made you waste time giving them sources for sources that they will never care about, while you could have spent that time actually giving those sources to someone that is benevolently ignorant and so can be taught. But, you know, there are so many dog whistles nowadays. When you hear about gender ideology, always look twice, because that's the kind of way that they think queerness does not exist, trans people do not exist, and ironically, they make our existence pass for our choice. But make no mistake, making it pass for a choice and tell, well, if you stop choosing to be trans, I'm gonna be fine with you. Stop choosing to be trans means not being. And you know what the opposite of being is? That. I don't want to go to the logical conclusion of this, despite the fact that there are studies and data that show the effect not only on mental health, but on the final steps that somebody can take to take control of their life if everything else is taken away from them. But when you need to put things on the table and draw conclusions, you should think about these things. You should think about the actual consequences. Something that I said in my video You're Not Witches, You're Abusers, which the abusers in questions managed to make me feel like I should have self-tone policed that, which is an achievement. I'll give them that. I know the pitfall of believing that, oh, they don't listen to me because of my tone. If I am calmer, if I am quieter, then maybe what I say will be more valid. But they don't look at my sources, so why would anything that I say be valid more than the receipts? Because when we don't look at the receipts, then we look at the tone. And when it's not the tone, it's what I talk about, there's no winning. There will always be something. That's why your silence will not protect you. Be always very mindful of what is asked of people. And I can tell you this from the activist, gender ideologist that I am. What we want is to exist. If all the TERFs and gender criticals were to go about their own life and stop harassing us, we don't have qualms with people. We have qualms with the way that they are trying to affect our life, our public life, our private life. And that's the thing. We never have the issue of, oh, you need to not be seen, you need to not be outside. Because again, make no mistake, not letting people use bathrooms is just telling them that the only place you can be is your own house, because then you have somewhere when you can go, when you need to go to the bathroom. They did this to the Victorians, by the way, to Victorians women. Somebody mentioned it to me in a comment when I talked about this last, and then very serendipitously, Jay Draper did a video about it. Yeah, the reason why they didn't want ladies' toilets at all outside in Victorian times is because otherwise women would have become too independent and they could go out all day shopping and doing stuff, and we wouldn't want that. What decent and proper lady does that? So yeah, not wanting trans people in bathrooms at all, just to make sure, that's what it is. It's the same thing. They want us not to have a public life. And that's the best thing that I can advise you to do. Do this test. Do these people argue against somebody's existence? You know, about something that they cannot change? Their identity, their race, their disability? Or do they just want them to shut the fuck up and let other people live in peace, like we do with TERFs and gender criticals? And again, if they didn't bother us, we don't have qualms with their existence. And that, in a nutshell, is the difference, children. Yeah.